you want to put on a happy face and feel joyous and peaceful with your family, but instead all you feel is this anxiety and sadness and stress.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for not parent expected or non-paternal event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. Welcome to episode 63, and today I am speaking with Leigh. Hi, Leigh.
Hi, Lily.
How are you today?
I am just fine. How are you?
I'm good because I'm on winter break and my house is empty and free, and you are the only person I have to talk to today, really. So,
oh, that's amazing. Am I the last one for 2020?
You are. Okay, and I think I'll actually be able to release this New Year's Eve. So you will for real be the last one of 2020.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing after the year we've all had. I'll take it.
I know. But I mean, it's not like everything is going to change on the first day of 2021, right?
That's exactly right. Exactly.
I have your emails here, and I don't want to give any of your story away because you're a storyteller kind of professionally for a living, or you were at one point, right?
I was at one point, yes. I spent some time on stage and in front of cameras as an actress, telling other people's stories. And so having to tell my own is just a little bit daunting, but I will do my best. I'll do my best to be articulate, and we'll see what happens.
Exactly. Yes, telling your own story. I know when I told mine in season 1, you're vulnerable and it's your own story. You're not just following a script. It is daunting. It is scary. So thank you for doing this today. And why don't you just go ahead and start and tell us what your original family was like.
Okay, can I start first by thanking you and having your podcast? No, honestly, because you've been a lifeline for me, because most of the resources available to NPEs are accessed through Facebook, and I'm not on Facebook. And so I've kind of just been out there flailing about on my own, trying to figure out who I am by myself, and then to heal by myself from the identity crisis that comes from finding out your DNA surprise. And so when I found your podcast, it sort of became an obsession for me. And I listened to all of the stories, and for the most part, I listened to them back and forth going down to work. I have about a 45 to 50-minute commute, and I would just get lost and absorbed in all of these stories. And I think what sticks out the most from the podcast and listening to people reveal their stories is the sort of common threads that link all of us together. And we hear a lot about secret keepers and the psychological components that come along with that, like narcissism and denial, and sometimes even pathological lying. Those things are just common in so many of these stories. And then you have the shame and the angst and the identity crises on the part of the NPEs, the people who are trying to find out their truth. And I guess I struggled a lot over how I should tell my story. And it's kind of difficult to realize that in order to tell your truth about who you are and where you come from, you have to reveal the ugliness and the darkness and dysfunctional family dynamics that someone else has spent a lifetime covering up. So I really do want to thank you for being the conduit through which I can reveal the truth about myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
And you are so welcome, Leigh. I'm happy to record all of our stories. And I'm glad you brought that up about, just reminding me that so many of us in the community aren't on social media. So this is another way to take in content and receive support.
It's fantastic. And even despite that, I think if somehow my mother comes across this and hears my story, she's going to see it as a distinct act of rebellion and defiance on my part.
Oh, yes, she will. Sorry, not to scare you more, but yeah, it's the truth.
Yes, and I'm embracing it finally. Okay, so I guess to talk about my family of origin, if you were a stranger, like looking in from the outside, I suppose you could say my childhood was normal, or at least it appeared normal. I grew up in a middle-class suburb in Massachusetts. I was the oldest of 4 children and the oldest grandchild on both sides, on my mother's side and my birth certificate father's side. And my birth certificate father was a highly respected small businessman in our community. He was an appointed official in the town government. He also spent many, many years as a volunteer, as a coach in youth sports. To everyone in our community, he is well known. He's beloved. And I would say most people would say about him that he is smart and sweet and compassionate and silly and kind, and that he has an unbelievable work ethic. He lost his father tragically and very suddenly when he was a boy, and he grew up very poor in a working class city. So to him, what made a good father was to be a good provider. And he absolutely did do that, particularly as I got older and his business was flourishing and he started making a lot more money. And he did work very, very hard to the extent that everything in our lives revolved around his business and the seasonal nature of that business. It was sort of like cyclical, where certain months of the year it was pretty much nonstop, and other months of the year it would taper off. My mom grew up in a town that was a little bit wealthier. It was very small and close-knit, and everybody knew everybody else. My mom's family was very athletic. My uncles, my aunts, my mother, they all had sports at which they all excelled. And at the time of my conception, my mom was the oldest of 7 children, which turned into 8 after I was born. So I actually have an uncle who is a year younger than me. My mom, as a teenager, was very attractive, very outgoing. She was 18 years old when I was conceived and 19 when I was born. My birth certificate father was 19 when I was conceived and 20 when I was born. So he was actually a student in college at that time. And the story was that my mother introduced my birth certificate father to my grandfather by saying, "I'm pregnant and this is so and so, and we're getting married." And in hindsight, that struck my aunts as odd because my mother had never spoken about him previously. And like I said before, in their town, everybody knew everyone. They knew their friends, their acquaintances, and they all traveled in the same small circles. So they just thought that that was bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
And since I was born, when my birth certificate dad was in college, initially my mom and I lived with her parents. And they're since both deceased. I was very, very close with them both. I loved them very, very deeply. I was sort of in awe of my grandfather. He was a Marine, a war hero. He served in Korea. He wasn't a very outgoing man. Uh, he wasn't a man of many words, I guess you could say. But when he spoke, I would immediately tune to his voice. And in that family, because it was so big, nobody waited for pauses, like those natural pauses in conversation where it's polite to interject. It was just everybody talking over everybody else. But the only voice that I ever wanted to hear was my grandfather's, because when he spoke, it would probably be something wise and profound. My grandmother, she was foul-mouthed. I get a little bit of that from her. She was very blunt, very practical. I traveled a lot with them and their youngest son, my uncle. When I was a child, we traveled all over the United States and to Canada. And I was very close to that particular uncle as a child, close like a sibling because we were so close in age. And I loved those trips. They meant a lot to me. They still do mean a lot to me because I got to see so much of this country. And oddly, I was reflecting on this the other day that one of those trips that we took was to Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island. And we were looking for genealogical information about my grandfather's parents and his grandparents. And it was that trip that sort of ignited in me a love of genealogy and heritage and ethnicity. But I never realized until now how important that would become. So, my brother, he came along 3 years after me. And then my sister came along 3 years after that. And then when I was 17 years old, my parents adopted my youngest brother. From the outside, you could probably say that we were a normal family, but underneath that, if I'm being honest, there was a lot of neglect. I'd probably call it benign neglect, but it was neglect nevertheless. My parents, especially when I was much younger, They were both heavy pot smokers. They were drinkers. My mother still drinks a lot. A lot of my memories of my childhood involve my parents doing drugs and having friends over, and it wasn't even really hidden from the kids. It was just like out in the open, like it was a normal thing. But that was the 70s, and I think things were different back then. But us kids, we spent a lot of time outside playing without really any supervision or oversight. But again, that was the times. That was what you did. As my birth certificate dad's business became more successful, though, he for the most part, he stopped his addictive behaviors, at least from my vantage point as a kid. My mom never did, but in general, they both got better at providing basic needs. But I wouldn't say that either of them ever met any of our emotional needs, to the point where you could say that they outsourced a lot of their parental tasks. Like, we had babysitters all the time. We spent a lot of time with grandparents and aunts and uncles. But I didn't complain about that because I loved my grandparents. I loved my mother's sisters and her brothers, and even my birth certificate dad, his siblings. They're all wonderful, terrific people. But they all met our needs better than our parents did. My parents didn't even take me or my brother to our freshman orientation at college. They never came to any parent weekends, which I just, as a mom myself, I can't imagine raising a child and not wanting to be part of those milestones, especially those things where your child is probably scared or even just a little bit nervous. Like, don't you want to be there to sort of usher them into that chapter of their life?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't get it. For very different reasons. They're both self-centered people. My birth certificate dad, because he was singularly focused on his business, and that's understandable to me. It really is. He was trying to provide for his wife and his children. And that decision is something that every small business owner has to face. You have to sacrifice being there for your family in order to sustain your business's success. And that takes hard work and long hours and worry and anxiety. And I get it. And I don't blame him for that. That's a decision they made together as a couple and as parents. But the problem is that typically in a situation like that, especially back then in the 70s and 80s, the mom would stay home and the mom would take care of the children and the household needs, and the dad would bear the burden of being the provider. But in our case, that wasn't the dynamic of our household. I was thinking about this, and I literally have no memories whatsoever of being comforted by my mom. I have no memories of cuddling with her, of hugging her, like no celebrations on her part, no yay, hooray you for any of my successes in school, when I played sports, on stage. I'm not sure if my siblings do either. I've never asked them. But it's just apparent to us and most other people that my mom is very self-centered and very secretive. And I always thought that her resentment came from me being a teenage pregnancy. Like, she was 18 and she missed out on her life, like all the fun and the freedom that you get to experience when you're in your late teens and your 20s. But now that I have this discovery, the truth is even more complex than just a teenage pregnancy. Like, I'm the result of her shameful encounters with multiple men, or, two at the minimum, and her fear of exposing that. And I guess if I think about it, really, her selfishness is the result of longing for something else, because she didn't want to live the life she had. And my NPE story is just the tip of this gigantic iceberg, this Titanic size iceberg of her secrets. On top of the drug and alcohol abuse, she had multiple affairs over the course of my life. And I know of one particular affair that lasted about 3 decades, from when I was about 15 until just a couple of years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I've had multiple family members, family friends reveal this to me on separate occasions. But that's probably a discussion for another kind of podcast. My teenage years were turbulent, I guess, for lack of a better word, because as I started to establish who I was, my mother became very controlling and unnecessarily angry with me. I was artsy in my interests, and to a certain extent in my appearance, and she hated that. I'm not sure why. I guess, keeping up with appearances in our community had something to do with that. But I was a really, really gifted student. I got all A's. I never smoked. I never drank. I never did drugs. I did everything that was asked of me. And I always felt like I was treated with suspicion, or the assumption that I was lying to them, particularly if it came to, boys in the neighborhood who were giving me attention or whatever. It was just impossible to please either my mother or my birth certificate father. My mother never cared about scholastic success from any of the kids. But if I brought home a report card with all A's and 1 A minus, my birth certificate father would say, "Why not all A's?" Mostly joking, like not malicious in any way. But that sort of comment, like that seeps in, and that becomes a part of you. And then you become this like absolute out of control type A perfectionist. Oh, and that's exhausting, I do have to say. But I do have to point out, my birth certificate dad always tried to placate me when things between my mom and me got heated or ugly. He wouldn't really intervene when she attacked me, like either verbally and a couple of times physically, but afterwards he would take me to the mall and he would let me pick out new clothes. And sometimes, this is amazing, sometimes he would ask me, like, why does she treat you this way? Or why does she get so angry at you? And I would think to myself, like, even as a teenager, why don't you fucking ask her? She's your wife. Like, don't you two talk about your children or parenting or why she's so unhappy all the time? I just didn't get it. There was one time in my late teens, and I came home and I had gotten a different hair color at the stylist, and my mom just lost it. Like, the moment she looked at me, she turned on a dime. She absolutely freaked out, and she physically attacked me with absolutely no warning. Yeah, so it was a little tricky, like, navigating that volatility and, like, walking on eggshells all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Especially, like, knowing that my birth certificate father, he would try to make it better after the fact, but he was just too weak to stop it in the moment. And my mom, she led a very active social life. She went out several nights a week. And in hindsight, now that I know that she was out with other men enjoying herself, and my birth certificate father, because he was always exhausted from working so much, he left it to me to look after the kids once I was old enough to be the babysitter for everyone. And I didn't mind. I really didn't mind. I love babies. I loved caring for my littlest brother, the adopted brother. I do remember holding him all the time. I didn't like to put him down. I would just hold him with one arm and be doing my writing papers and doing my homework with the other arm. Yeah.
Cute.
Yeah. And I held him so much that he would fuss for other people, but not for me. That's the honest to God truth. And I do remember my mother paid me one of the only compliments of my entire life, because my sister asked her out of jealousy, why does he love it so much when Leigh holds him? And my mother said to her, because she is gentle. And that was one of the rare moments when I felt like she saw me. Because for most of my life, she was either dismissive of everything about me or, sometimes even outright cruel. And when you have an upbringing like that, you learn to suppress your own needs. And that's something I even struggle with today. And you learn when it serves you to be either invisible or overly helpful, depending on, the kind of daughter that they're looking for in a particular circumstance. But you're never fully you, because parents like that don't care about your emotional needs. They care about their needs, and you're there to serve them. But, despite those dynamics, my birth certificate father really is a good man. He really is. And I do love him very much. And I have an enormous amount of compassion for my mom. And I work very hard to forgive her every day. And most days I succeed. But some days it's hard. It's hard to suppress that anger. That, yeah.
Wow, you do a great job of explaining your I was going to say childhood, but you're even talking about your later teenage years and explaining your parents. I was just nodding along with what you were saying, everything.
Thank you. COVID, if there's any silver lining, and my story has a couple of silver linings, but if COVID has given me anything, it is the time to really self-reflect and to figure things out and help
So
help
true.
help find a stronger footing in this world, I guess.
Nice.
So I think that takes us to why I took a test and how did I find out who I am.
And I'm just being a listener today, so feel free to just go right into that.
Okay, so I've never heard anybody take a test for this reason in all of the podcasts I've listened to, and I took a test to find out if I carry the gene for Alzheimer's. My birth certificate father, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in July of 2017. And anyone who knows this disease knows that it's very destructive on the family. Even families that are strong, it is emotionally and physically exhausting. And over time, you start to feel really hollowed out and empty. And I had spent 2 years as one of his primary caregivers. And I decided that I had to know if I carried the gene for it, because I thought that I would live my life very differently if my future held this same sort of destruction for my husband and my son. So in September of 2019, I was searching on Google for DNA tests, and I found an article that sort of ranked them in order of like their scientific efficacy. And so I found this one, and it was by CRI Genetics, and it had 5-star reviews. So I bought it. And I wasn't really interested in the sort of ethnicity ancestry component because, my mother's father, the one that I had traveled with, he had already done an extensive family tree, and he traced his roots all the way back to a man from England who came to America on the Mayflower. And I actually was a member of Ancestry.com since I think it was 2010. And I was just sort of filling in the gaps and piecing together the other parts of my family tree, especially on my birth certificate dad's side. And I found the manifesto of the ship on which my birth certificate father's grandmother came to America. She left Ireland in the 1890s by herself in her late teens. And it's strange because we were so fiercely proud of that story, like her courage and her determination to seek a better life, and then to find out I have absolutely no connection to that woman whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time, I was really singularly focused on this health part of it, and that's why I bought the CRI test, because I thought it was more scientific and, less, commercially accessible like the ancestry ones. So in November, I got the CRI results, And my first error is that the test I bought didn't actually have the health component, because in the checkout process, I didn't add that to the order. So all I had to click through was the ethnicity and the traits. And the first thing that jumped out at me is that it showed that I am 15.3% Italian, which didn't make any sense to me because my birth certificate dad was nearly 100% Irish, and my mom is a mixture of German and English and Irish. So I should have been mostly Irish, with a bit of German from my mother's mother and a bit of English from my mother's father. And at the time that I got the results and was looking through them, I was with my brother and our uncle, my birth certificate dad's brother. And I mentioned the results of my test and that I had been an idiot and neglected to order the gene tests. But we were all sort of puzzled by the results showing that I was Italian. And we all sort of laughed and they joked because I'm blue-eyed, I'm blonde, I'm fair-skinned, like very, very fair-skinned, like translucent, and definitely Northern European in appearance as opposed to Southern European. So my brother went immediately and he set up an account at CRI Genetics. He ordered a test so that we could sort of cross-reference our ethnicities. And my uncle mentioned, my daughter, your cousin, she has taken 23andMe and Ancestry, and you should reach out to her, ask her opinion, get a different test. And I didn't realize, he revealed to me, that the tests actually link you to other people who have taken the tests, like your DNA matches. And that's another component that CRI Genetics didn't have. So I texted my cousin. I didn't give her any specifics. I just said, which one do you like better? And she responded. She sent me screenshots of their interfaces, and I liked the look of the 23andMe test. So I ordered that one. And actually, at the time, they were marketing their health component very strongly. So it's good that I ordered that one for that reason. And, we kept joking about it, my brother and I. And he actually put one of those magnetic bumper stickers of an Italian flag on the back of my car. And it was there for 8 days, literally 8 days. And then my son noticed it and pointed it out. And I was like, where on earth did that come from? Isn't that great? Like,
Oh, that's
yeah,
cute.
because if you
I
can't
love it.
joke about these things, then you're just going to wallow in this horrible anxiety and sadness.
Yes, so true.
Yeah. But, it never, ever crossed my mind that the results weren't accurate or that a mistake had been made. Because you hear that a lot. People are saying, I called Ancestry and said, you must have made a mistake. I never thought that. I just knew it in my soul and in my bones. I knew. But you still sort of maintain that level of detachment from it because it's not real yet. It's not real. But then on December 20th of 2019, just about a year ago, I got my 23andMe results, and they were similar in the ethnic composition. The Italian was a little bit higher. I think it was like 24%. But the main thing is that it didn't link me at all to my cousin in the DNA matches. Or another cousin that I knew from my birth certificate father's side. I knew she should also be in there. She wasn't. And My brother was still at that point waiting for his CRI Genetics test results, so he ordered a 23andMe. And that was 5 days before Christmas. And it was a weird Christmas from an emotional standpoint, because you're surrounded by all these people and you're thinking, I've loved you all my life and you aren't who I thought you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not who you think I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really jarring. It's a difficult time of year to feel that sort of unsettling, unmoored sense of, I guess it's deep longing and loss. And you want to put on a happy face and feel joyous and peaceful with your family, but instead all you feel is this anxiety and sadness and stress.
Mm-hmm.
So we waited for my brother's results from 23andMe. And while we waited, I started emailing people from my DNA matches. And having listened to all of these podcasts and being a person of faith, I really do believe that these journeys can be guided by angels. I know mine is. Mine's in the form of a third cousin from Canada. His name is Robert, and he responded very enthusiastically to my request seeking information about my biological father. We went back and forth, he and I, comparing our trees, and he determined that we were connected along the line of a Scottish clan that fled Scotland in the 1700s and settled in Canada. And very early on in this sort of like DNA detective work, he actually pinpointed the great grandfather where we intersected.
Impressive.
Yes, this man is unbelievable. I owe him the hugest debt of gratitude. And he had his own NPE story. That was why he was so willing to help me. He was adopted, and he spent about a year trying to find where he came from. So he built this enormous family tree, and that's how he was able to find my great-grandfather. But the difficulty was that my great-grandfather had been married to 2 different women. And the DNA matches from that line in 23andMe were limited to mostly third cousins. So with my limited knowledge and detective skills, it was going to be very difficult to find clues about who is my biological father. And in the meanwhile of all that, going back and forth with Robert, my brother's results came in. And that was early on in my process, so I was obsessively logging in multiple times a day to 23andMe. And I saw them first on my tree. And he was listed as half sibling.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, how traumatic.
Oh, it was horrible. I was sitting in my living room and I just burst out sobbing hysterically. And my husband and my son, they came rushing over to me and I couldn't speak. I turned my phone toward them And they could see in that little box, half sibling. And I texted my brother, and he called me right back because I know that he was driving. He had me on speakerphone, and we went back and forth about what to do and how on earth do we approach this with Mom. Because confronting her about anything would be very difficult. So we decided together that I would reach out to my mother's sisters to ask for their advice. And they were both amazing. They've been amazing through this whole journey for me. They're both very different women. The younger one is logical and practical and blunt and matter of fact. And she spent her career in law, so she's totally brilliant at tracking down information. And my other aunt is deeply sympathetic and loving and compassionate. So between the two of them, I felt like, they both really, really looked out for me. So the three of us, we met for lunch, and we went through my mother's dating history according to what my two aunts could remember. And we looked at pictures on Facebook of my mom's old boyfriends, and they were trying to see if I looked like anybody. And then by the end of that lunch date, we decided that the more compassionate sister would reach out to my mother and tell her about my DNA surprise. Because we knew that if I did it, if I approached her, she would either attack me or dismiss me or, say, oh, the science, that can't be right.
Yes.
But that's exactly what she did with my aunt. So we regrouped, and I just kept searching my tree for matches, and I emailed folks. Some people responded, some people didn't. And then finally, that cousin, my cousin Robert, said he was absolutely convinced that I was descended from that Scottish line that he was also descended from, and he told me I should order a test from Ancestry because there were many of those cousins from that Scottish clan that I would match to. So I did, and I got those results, and there in my ethnicity was 57% Scottish from the Highlands and Islands and 15% Italian. And there were loads more matches than 23andMe. But nothing really concrete that I could go by until May of 2020. And that's when a close family match appeared, a female. And that was sort of in the beginning of the lockdowns of COVID. And I was obsessing a little bit less, so I wasn't checking as frequently. I sort of, tucked it away in the back of my mind. But on that particular day, something made me log in. I don't know what it was. I was about to go out grocery shopping, and then there it was, the notification, you have a new match. And I misread the match. So in Ancestry, it says close family, and then there's a dash, and then it says first cousin. So I read that to mean that I had a match that was a first cousin. I didn't realize it's a range. That means the person is either your immediate family ending up possibly your first cousin, but it could be any number of things, including an aunt, a half sibling. So I emailed my cousin Robert. I told him about the new match. I asked him if he could see where she fit in on his humongous Scottish tree. And then I emailed her thinking she was my cousin. And in all of my emails, I used, very generic sort of terms. I'm seeking information about my bio dad. And to her, I said, I think maybe your father and my father might be brothers. And then after sending that message, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should sort of look deeper into the centimorgans.
Yeah.
So I looked closely, and they were high. They were well above 1,500.
Mm.
And then I was like, shit, she's probably either my half sister or my aunt.
Oh.
So I sent her another message in my enthusiasm saying, oh my God, we're probably connected in a deeper way, and you're probably my aunt or my sister. And in the meantime, my cousin replied and said, yeah, she's probably your half sister or your aunt. And he advised me, please proceed carefully. You don't want to shock or upset anybody. But, it was too late.
Mm-hmm.
I was so excited. I needed to know. And I had already messaged her twice, and all I could do was pray. But I was always very, very respectful in my messages. Whether I was reaching out to a third cousin or her, I always said, I don't want to disrupt anyone's life or cause any heartache.
Yeah.
I told her, I just want a name and I'll be happy. And she did respond. She said she felt compassion for me and my plight. She suspected that my father was one of her brothers, but she felt more comfortable if I would ask my mother, since my mother was still alive. And rather than explain to her how I wasn't likely to get a straight answer from my mother, I just said thank you and I'll be in touch. So again, I asked my mother's sisters, what should I do? What should I do? And they thought it would be better if I emailed my mother, because if I called her or went to her face to face, she would lie or bully me or resort to any number of unproductive responses instead of just telling me the truth. So I wrote an email explaining the results from all of the tests. I confirmed what it said about the link to her son, who turned out to be my half brother, and the lack of links to my birth certificate father's nieces, who my half brother was linked to. And I said, I'm not angry with you, and I don't want to know the details of what happened unless you want to share them with me. I just want a name. And then I spelled out the three names of my biological father's sisters, brothers, my matched aunt's brothers. There were three of them. And I sent that email on a Friday. And there was no response. She didn't reply to my email. She didn't text me. She didn't call me. But of course, my aunts are constantly texting me. Anything yet? Any word from your mom? Have you heard anything? And my aunt, with her amazing sleuthing skills, found a yearbook photo of the aunt that I matched with and the man who turned out to be my biological father. And she also found an obituary of my biological father's deceased brother. And in the obituary, when it references all the other family members, it referred to my biological father and where he lived. So I had that to go on if I didn't get anything from my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 days later, I saw her in person, and she said that there's a glitch in her email and she can't send replies to emails that she gets, that she wasn't avoiding me, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I just very bluntly said, "Give me a name." And she said it. And it turned out to be the man whose yearbook picture was on my phone. And I had the town and the state where he lived. So I reached back out to my matched aunt and I told her what my mother confirmed. And I said, "I don't want anything from your brother other than to offer my compassion and understanding." And I gave her all of my contact info, my address, my cell phone number, my email, and asked her to pass it along to him. And she sent me it truly was a lovely response. And she said she'd reach out to him. She mentioned that I have a half brother who's on Facebook, which is not helpful because I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, neither is my biological father. And I just waited. And during that period of waiting, I worked very hard to be okay with the fact that I may never hear from him. But at least I had the information of where I came from, and I could be proud of the fact that I'm Scottish, because oddly, I've had this lifelong love of everything Scottish, even to the point where my wedding was plaid. The men in my wedding wore plaid.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And I couldn't wait to dig in to find out about this clan in Scotland that I come from. But a few weeks passed, and it was Monday, July 13th, and I just felt this unbelievably strong feeling that my biological father was sad and lonely. I don't know where that feeling came from, but I was taking a shower and it hit me like a ton of bricks. So I started to craft another email message to his sister, but I wanted to make sure I worded it carefully because I didn't want her to think I was a lunatic or, thinking I was some weird sort of psychic person, which I'm not. But I just know that feeling was sent to me for a reason.
Hmm.
So I wrote the email, but I didn't send it. And 2 days later, on July 15th of 2020, he called me. And I initially missed the call. I had my phone on DND. I was watching TV with my husband. And during a break, I saw a missed call from a Florida number. So I Googled the number, and the number was from the town where I knew my biological father lived. And it was 9 o'clock at night, and I normally go to bed at like 9:30, 9:15. And I was partially hyperventilating, but I called him back. And he picked up after a couple of rings. And in that first phone call, we talked for 2 hours.
Mm.
Amazing, amazing.
Wow.
And the information he had about me that I had given to his sister, it was sort of loosely based on my mother's general, whereabouts when I was conceived. So he actually mistakenly thought that my mother was somebody else he dated that had a connection to the same university that my mother did. But when I provided more details about who my mom really was, he realized that she was someone he spent one night with after meeting her through a mutual friend. And he does have memories of her. He remembers her as being very pretty and very thin, which she was. And he remembers he took her back to his parents' house, my grandparents. And that is where, on that one night, I was conceived. And he says that there was no coercion on his part or violence or anything like that. And I absolutely believe him. And he says that after that night, he never heard from her again. Yeah. And even in our first conversation with him, he said that he was a very selfish, careless, and carefree young man. Those are the exact words that he used: selfish, careless, and carefree. And I respect him a lot for that sort of self-reflection and willingness to admit his flaws. And he genuinely had no idea about me, none. I think he's more shell-shocked by my existence than I am about somebody else being my dad. Yeah.
Because he never saw her again.
No, never. And I know for a fact that I came into his life at the exact right time that I was meant to, and vice versa. And we're both very blessed that we found each other.
So you guys you have a relationship.
We do. I like to say it this way. When I talk to the very, very few people who know this about me, I say that as my birth certificate father fades away from Alzheimer's, my biological father is coming into focus. So I am very lucky, and I realize that. I thank God for that every day, that I'm lucky to have two dads. And they're very different. They're very different. In that first phone call that I had with my father, he told me about his career in the Army and his career as an iron worker. And it turns out the factory where he worked is the same factory where my grandfather worked after he left the Marines. So they were in different departments, but they were in the same place every day for many, many years. And my biological father lived 1.7 miles from my father, my birth certificate father, and my mother before he moved down to Florida.
Oh.
Odd, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
To think I may have passed him in a store or, in the car driving down the street. My parents may have passed him in the grocery store. Just bizarre. But at the end of that first phone call, I don't know. I think our connection was so strong. We both said, "I love you." From that point, we've talked or texted almost every day. We've sent pictures back and forth. We've sent gifts. In fact, under my Christmas tree right now, there's a box that we received last night from him, and it has our Christmas presents in it, one for me, one for my son, and one for my husband, which is so cute and so lovely. He's a very different kind of father from my birth certificate father. He's funny. He's a very deep thinker. He's very, very talkative. He dominates almost every single telephone conversation. But I love hearing his voice, and I'm a very good listener. I really am. And his voice is that sort of gruff, deep, very masculine kind of voice, and I could just listen to it all day. He calls me angel and doll face and darling daughter. And he tells his friends about me. He shows them my pictures. Look at my daughter. She's so gorgeous. So I know that he's proud. And I've never laid eyes on him face to face, not once, because of the virus. And I can't travel down to Florida. Otherwise, when I get back here to Massachusetts, I have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and I can't do that.
Yeah.
So I've never, he has 2 other children. So I have a half brother that I've never spoken to or met. I have a half sister that I've never spoken to or met.
Okay. You haven't spoken to them?
No. I'm not sure they know about me. He doesn't speak to them very much. They don't have a close relationship.
Okay.
I think that's part of the reason why he tries so hard with me. He doesn't want to mess it up.
Yep, I could see that.
Yeah. So, what we have, it's great. It's really great. It's exciting to get to know him and to see where our similarities lie. He's deeply pious. He's Catholic, and so am I. And yet he has a sort of, naughty, foul-mouthed side to him, and I have that as well. Yeah. And I love being an Army brat.
What a beautiful relationship you two are growing.
Yes. And we'll see where it goes from here and what it will be like when I get to meet him face to face.
And then your mother and your birth certificate father, where is that currently?
Well, I still spend a great deal of time helping to take care of my birth certificate father and all of his, health issues. He and I have always had a great working relationship. It's not as deep and profound as the one I now have with my biological father, but we both treat each other with kindness and compassion. And he's definitely worthy of that. He's a very good man. And everything's fine with my mother as long as I keep everything on the surface. And I don't stir up any trouble with my rebellious nature. If I just
of course
go on pretending, let's just pretend.
Yeah.
And I've got enough experience doing that. Right?
Yeah, so many of us do. Yep.
Yes. So I won't be rocking the. If she asks, I'll tell her. I've been speaking to my bio dad for 6 months now. Her eyes will probably pop out of her head, but that might be something that I need to confront sooner than later. But for now, I'm just going along.
And with your birth certificate father, he has Alzheimer's. You're a caregiver for him. Would you, I don't even know if this is something I bring up. Is that something you would talk with him about, your DNA surprise, or do you just, where are you with that? I guess I'll ask.
I think from the beginning, I decided not to bring it up with him.
He didn't know from your mom or anything when you were a kid?
I don't know. It's odd because people have been reaching back into, documents and pictures for him because, part of Alzheimer's is they start regressing and they go backward in time. And his sister found a letter that he had written to her when I was a baby. And the letter was so oddly detached. It didn't speak about those things that you speak about when you have this beautiful new baby. It was all about working and money and things like that. And another thing that was really bizarre, he refers to me 3 or 4 times in the letter, and he misspells my name.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
And I'm not sure what to make of that.
That is really strange.
It is, and I'm not sure whether that means he knows I wasn't his daughter and therefore didn't connect with me, or if that's just him. I don't really know what to make of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I could see other people misspelling your name all the time. It's Leigh, Leigh, so it is a unique version, but your father, that is strange.
You were part of the team that picked my name. How do you not know how to spell it correctly? Totally bizarre.
Speaking of your name, now is the time when I should ask if people want to get in touch with you or know more about you, or if they have a question, could they do that? And how could they?
Yes, I would love for people to reach out to me. And they can find me via email at NPELeigh, N as in Nancy, P as in Peter, E as in elephant, LEIGH at gmail.com, NPELeigh@gmail.com.
Okay, and I will put that in the show notes or show description to confirm her email address. And I should just quickly mention, someone emailed me and said, your show notes don't show up for me. I guess if you're a Spotify user, I forgot everyone has a different podcast platform, but it won't show up on Spotify. It's mostly through iTunes podcast or Buzzsprout, where you can get more detailed show notes. But Leigh, thank you so much for your beautiful storytelling
Thank
today.
you, Lily. You are an angel. I adore you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks again to Leigh for sharing today. These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE that would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.